language, which is a very derogatory term.
But I mean,
Some are appropriate language, and the other ones are just kind of, female or woman. So anyway, those names have been changed. I'm just well, maybe in school, yeah. Well, they have to be very
only one way in, one way out. Everybody knew.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I am trying to remember how start where she's so horrible. Home. Right. And yeah, and then
No, I just know it's because when we went to Canada, they made me.
And the interesting thing is that the video series very, very well done. You get very, very touching. Was really good. Years and years ago, oh, I guess you could call it a hard I do remember, and I remember when she finally gets out of the office. And on your birthday, my mother and my grandmother, which back then, so my mother comes home. Yeah, I know. She had a speech.
At her exercise class, she's taking up boxing.
So what are you up to lately?
Oh, yeah? She's very sweet.
Well, there's always bars, right?
It's always December, so you have to finish it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I was really that, and I'm quite upset about that. And you know, at the two is to warm up. Really bad wind, so we're supposed to have extremely hot winters and extremely hot summer and dry.
Oh, the blue. I bought blue ones and black, but I'm having trouble. They're doing about their I guess that all happens in the third.
The boy, the girl, basically, is what it is.
Is that what it is? And El Nino, I think, the idea was to have it around or, you know,
I always wondered how they point the girl into weather.
My Spanish is still.
No one quite knows.
I don't remember.
I like my French. Actually, I did Spanish school that I get that education. They are very much.
We are there. Yeah. Right. I had 2 years of Latin, and then I took French in college.
It's hard to get friends at one time. One of those like things on tape, on the CD of my car, and it gets back to me.
And I think
Remember,
they were not negative.
you know, they really want to be too proud. They want perfection.
I thought,
I'm greedy now.
learn the language.
Not right there, is that okay?
I found that if you try,
Not right there. Hopefully I can kind of keep it there. Okay.
speak English, and a lot of them do. But the one thing is over there because my friend in Houston changed it.
You can move that format over or something, sir.
And they didn't speak English at all. I tried to speak French.
There, that'll be better.
Especially the grandpas. And then, and he said,
Well, good evening and thank you.
Being here. Happy 4th of July to everybody. So it was a couple days ago, but that's okay. So, but anyway, but thanks again for being here tonight. A couple of things that are out on the back table, be sure and pick them up. There's some of the bookmarks. This dark blue one with a little tassel on it has the quote from John Adams that says, really, we should be celebrating the 2nd of July, not the 4th. and it talks about his. But so that's why I bought those things. Then there's another one back there that has the America 250 logo on it on those things. So please pick them up both. They're good until they're gone. So please do that. Make sure that you fill out the little thing for the door prize. We're just doing something a little different this time. So there's some door prize items up here at the end. We'll pull those names at the end. Also back there is the schedule for my fall presentations, which will be here, and we're going to do World War I. So, and there'll be five segments, 4 in 26, and then as soon as TBK Bank gets their calendar out, then I'll be scheduling the January one. But that's where we're going to kind of start, and then we'll kind of see where we're going to go from that. But over on the back table, there are a few things that I brought. So just if you're interested, look at them before you leave tonight. I'm going to walk back here and just point out a couple of them. There's a book here that's like a notebook. It has got stamp cancellations for 1976 of all of the sites of the American Revolution. So those were ones, I think I got like one a month for, seemed like it was forever, a lot of them, but they're in here and they're all postmarked with the fancy postmarks that they did during 76. So the two bottles here, that one's an elephant and one's a donkey, those were from the 76 election. And they were Jim Beam bottles, but there was a presidential election year in that bicentennial year. And so those were commemoratives for that. And then the Colorado Centennial bottle is right next to it. And I do have to say, Colorado Centennial bottle and the two political bottles, I couldn't even buy those. I had to ask my dad to go buy them because I wasn't old enough then. So, because I was only 20 in 1976. So, no, I didn't. And we couldn't find them at the liquor stores here, so we had to go to Aurora, but Dad went and bought them for me. So, so they are empty. About 10 years ago, I drained the stuff out because I didn't want them to leak and start making. It was like dirty brown water is what it looked like because they were pretty old by then. So the other things is there's the Colorado Centennial pins, and these were some of the things we sold in the gift shop at the museum 50 years ago. So they were for the Colorado Centennial. So there's a few of those that I had left. This is the mint set for the 2026 coins. I got it about 3 days ago. So they've just released these. They are sold out already. So this is the one that's got the 5 quarters that are going to be for this year and that Lincoln penny. And the Lincoln penny is the only place you can get the Lincoln penny this year is in these sets or in the 2 proof sets, the silver proof set and the regular proof set. That's the only place those Lincoln pennies will be. And they've got the dual dates on them. So come check these out if you're interested in that. This is a proof set from 1976 that has the dual dates on the coins. So they didn't change the face of the coins other than the date, but the back had a commemorative back on them. So that is from 76. The other thing is all these newspapers. There's newspapers from the full newspaper from July 4th, 1976. There's also July 5th, 1976 for the day after the bicentennial. There's also the Colorado Centennial newspapers. And any of you that were around the Colorado Centennial, that was the day after the Big Thompson flood. So that's the headline that's on that paper. But it was all these things happened right at the same time. On the wall is the Colorado Centennial flag. That one we flew over the museum in 1976. And then the American Revolution, the bicentennial flag, also flew down at the museum. The Colorado Centennial flag flew on that wooden flagpole there by the Living Springs School. The other one flew on the big pole right next to the main building. So they said those are kind of a historic item too for being that old. Up above there is the America 250 flag. Colorado didn't do a flag for Colorado 150. They didn't do one. I tried to find it, but never did find one. So anyway, so please check these things out if you're interested at the end, and then I'll go up here and get started. So. So I start the story tonight, this 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Now, about 3 months ago, we talked about the Declaration of Independence here in this place, but I want to just do a kind of a quick review of it because that's what this is all about. July 4th, 1776. Of course, the purpose was demand that England grant American colonies their independence. And Thomas Jefferson, of course, is the main author. There were several other authors, but he's always been considered the main one, mostly because of some of the terminology that was in there. You know, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So those are Thomas Jefferson's words that lead that document off. Here's one of the early drafts, and you can see where they revised and edit and, you know, crossed things out and substituted words and all those kind of things. So I thought that's kind of interesting. This is a picture that I think it's a painting that just shows, you know, Benjamin Franklin is here, John Adams, and then Jefferson standing here with the document in his hand. But I think what's interesting about this, look at all the mess on the floor. All the different drafts and all the notes they had, and it's all wadded up on the floor. So that just kind of shows you that this was not a document that was just hammered out in just a few minutes. This took weeks and weeks and weeks, if not years, to come up with some of these ideas. This is the inkstand that was used to sign the Declaration of Independence. So the quill pens would have been inserted into these holes, and that's where the ink was that they would have signed that document with. So this is a really famous one. It's silver. It looks a little bit gold here, but this way the light was on it, but it's silver. This one also was used to sign the Constitution of the United States. They signed the Articles of Confederation with this one, and also the Bill of Rights were signed with this one. So this is a very famous article that was used in all these very prominent, you know, these cornerstone events for this country. So that is it in Independence Hall in Philadelphia. Okay, so the Declaration of Independence, we would not know what it really looked like if it hadn't been for these copper plate copies that were made in 1826 on the 50th anniversary of the... Is that better, guys? Okay. So, and so we know what that looked like, because if you see what the Declaration of Independence looks like today, it is very faded. And so it's, I'll show you a picture of it in a little bit, but are you sure you would have wanted to sign that? If you were one of these signers, had you been a member of the Second Continental Congress, you were a rebel and considered a traitor by the king. You knew that a reward had been posted for the capture of certain prominent rebel leaders, and the largest British armada ever assembled was just outside New York Harbor. Affixing your name to this document meant that you pledged your life, your fortune, and your sacred honor to the cause of freedom. So you were putting your life on the line if you signed this document. Okay? Justify the revolution based on natural rights. That is the kind of the bottom line of the document. Officially establish the United States in some form. Authored by Thomas Jefferson, prioritized principles like equality, popular sovereignty, listing specific grievances against King George III to rally support and gain international recognition. So most of the Declaration of Independence are charges against the king. The king did this, the king did this, the king did this. That's what goes down through all of that whole document. And so it's charges. Okay? Purpose, declared colonies are free from British rule, and explained the reasons. Because of all what the king had done. Okay? Asserted all men are created equal with those inalienable rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Okay? Heavily influenced by Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke on natural rights, social contract theory, all of those things are what government is based on in most places in the world today. Okay? The July 4th misconception also is on those bookmarks, but Congress approved independence on July the 2nd. That is really kind of the bottom line. They approved it. Final text was approved on July 4th. That's where the 4th of July comes in. Actual signing by most delegates wasn't until August, when they signed the official parchment paper. So the famous painting by John Trumbull depicts the committee presenting the draft, not the actual signing. Most people mislabel that, and they say the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It is not. It is the presenting the draft to the. So, timeline again: July 2nd, Congress officially votes for independence. Final text is approved, and then the signing on August 2nd. The Declaration of Independence did not create a new government. That's kind of a misconception that people say, oh, that's the birth of the United States. Not really. The Declaration of Independence did not set up a legal system. It justified the separation. That is all. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights establishes the legal structure, while the Declaration articulated the philosophy of what the country stands for. So it does not establish a new government. Okay. 56 delegates knew they were committing treason, and that would have led to their execution. John Hancock, first person to sign, he said he was going to sign that. Let me get to that one. Very large. And he says, I shall sign the declaration large enough so that the king may see my name without his spectacles. He wanted the king to be able to see his name on there. So this is his gravesite in Boston, and that's the monument where he's buried, and then there's the kind of the engraving of his picture. But that is in Boston. Okay. So yes, it's that old one down there along the Freedom Trail. So Declaration of Independence, you want to see it today, go to the National Archives in Washington. It is the treasury where all these things are kept. This is the Great Hall. Now, I didn't take this picture. I took the other ones. But clear over on this side are the Articles of Confederation. That's that very first government we had. This is the Declaration of Independence is in this display right here. In the one under the flags here, that's the 4 pages of the U.S. Constitution are in the middle. And then over here are the Bill of Rights. So anybody, if you go there, you start over on this side and you just move your way around. Okay? Barb and Dave, wherever you're at. So, okay. They are. The glass on top of them is between 2 and 3 inches thick. It's climate controlled. It's temperature controlled. There is and I don't know what the gas is. There's a form of gas that's in there to keep them from fading. But there's very strict, ideas to keep them whether you can read them from now on. But the Declaration of Independence was not taken care of very well in the early years. It actually was in a picture frame on wall in an office. And they would move it around different places. It was in the White House for a while and different places like that. But the Constitution of the United States went directly into better safekeeping. The Constitution, you can read every word of it and you can read every signature. But the Declaration, you can't. So this is the murals up above where the display are in the archives. So this is the people who signed the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson is standing there with the document in his hand. Okay. So that's what the Declaration looks like if you see it today. It is badly faded. You can, the first time I saw that, I was so disappointed because that's not what I expected to see. But they said, no, it was so neglected over all those years. So that's what it looks like on copies that we have and things like that. Again, it was that 1826 copper print, and I will show you a picture of that shortly, but that was one of those copies was in that Freedom plane when it was in Denver here about a month ago. Okay. So there's Independence Hall, where the Declaration was written and signed, the Constitution was written and signed here in this location, the Liberty Bell. Just over the last weekend, you saw lots of people there at the Liberty Bell getting their picture taken, and once they showed that the line was there was about 3,000 people in line to get in there. So that was a popular place. So there's another picture I took of Independence Hall. This is kind of the back side. And when I was there for a teacher's week several years ago, we were up in some of these upper rooms in Independence Hall doing some different seminar type things and stuff like that. So that is upstairs in there, and this is another room. I think they called this one the King's Room, but this was upstairs in Independence Hall. So Yeah, it is, way small. It's not near as big as you expect it. You think about, there was about 50 people seated there. So right now, there's about 50 people here. So think about Independence Hall, that deliberation room probably wasn't much bigger than this room. And it's, big things happened there in that small room. So this was the group of teachers I was with. I'm back in the back right here, I think. But this was one of the landings going up to those upper levels in Independence Hall. So there's another shot. Next time you have a $100 bill in your pocket, look at the back of it. That's what's on the back of it, is Independence Hall, on the back of a $100 bill. There's me at the Liberty Bell. So another shot of the Liberty Bell. So this is that room, the main room. And again, it's probably not much bigger than this room right here. This is built and redesigned as they believe it looked. Because in the years after the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, this became a restaurant and a boarding house, that building. And then later on, they decided, well, this is a pretty historic place. We probably ought to make a museum out of here. So they reconstructed the room based on people's diaries and sketches people had done. So all of these tables and all these things are not the originals. And I'm kind of I am a history geek. I think, I don't want to see a replica of something. I want to see the real thing. So that's those kind of things. It's like, well, it's okay, but that chair, that's the key here. That is the chair George Washington sat in when they deliberated the Constitution, and it is the only actual original piece that's in that room. And so that one is kind of a cool thing. So on the back of it, there is a sun with the rays. And somebody at that time, once they had signed the Constitution, they said, is this the sign of a setting sun or a rising sun? And Benjamin Franklin said, don't let anyone be mistaken. This is the sign of a rising sun. That this is the rising sun of this new nation that will endure for centuries. That was Benjamin Franklin's quote. But it's in that, on the back of that chair. So George Washington sat in that chair. Right? So there's that painting I was talking about. This is the presenting of the draft, not the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Now, notice in this painting, and I've got another slide later on, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson are right here. They detested each other. And in the painting, it's hard to see it in this one, but I've got a kind of a close-up of it. The artist made it look like John Adams was standing on Jefferson's foot because they wanted to show that they really did not like each other. So, but anyway, so we'll get back there in a little bit. So now we're going to fast forward 50 years, and we're going to go to the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So think about what had happened in America from 1776 to 1826. We'd had a new Constitution adopted. We'd had the War of 1812 against Great Britain, who had tried to come back in and take things back over. There was all kinds of those different things that had happened. But by 1826, the country was much more stable. Massive nationwide jubilee for the 50th anniversary. Prior to that, there had been very little celebrations of the Declaration of Independence. July 4th was just kind of one of those days that kind of rolled by. Few people did things, few governments did things, but not much. But grand parades, public orations, intense patriotism pops up in the country in 1826. Thomas Jefferson, a few weeks before July the 4th, writes this, and it's published in newspapers nationwide. May it be to the world what I believe it will be, the signal of arousing men to burst the chains and to assume the blessings and security of self-government. That form which we have substituted restores the free right to the unbounded exercise of reason and freedom of opinion. All eyes are opened or opening to the rights of man. For ourselves, let the annual return of this day forever refresh our recollections of these rights and an undiminished devotion to them. So here we are. Thomas Jefferson, the main author, says this 50 years later. Okay. The Golden Jubilee was marked with larger celebrations than previous years, focusing on the surviving heroes. So think, there would have been a lot of veterans still living from the American Revolution. So that was another thing that they celebrated, the people who had fought this war. Okay. Nationwide events led by military companies, public readings of the Declaration, orations, firing of 50-gun salutes. A grand parade marched past President John Quincy Adams and Vice President John C. Calhoun outside the White House, followed by fireworks. So there was a big celebration. So there's John Quincy Adams, first president to actually be photographed, so we know exactly what he looked like, and then John C. Calhoun. If you go back and think about when we did the Civil War series, John C. Calhoun was pretty prominent in the Civil War, South Carolina, but he's Vice President of the United States under John Quincy Adams. But Thomas Jefferson and John Adams is this strange little quirk in this history. So there's Adams and Jefferson. There they are in this picture again. There is the fateful thing on his foot. Okay, Adams is stepping on Jefferson's toes. Okay, they detested each other. Okay? While in office, they hated each other. Okay, they met face to face, they wouldn't even speak. It was that big of a hatred. The Adams-Jefferson presidency started in 1797. In those days, whoever wins the election becomes the president. Whoever gets second place, they're the new vice president. So you can see that doesn't work very good. So think about now. We would have Donald Trump as president and we would have Joe Biden as the vice president. How well would that work? Okay? So you can see that's why the 12th Amendment gets passed. That where we elect the president and vice president as a team, they're on the same side and all this kind of stuff. But this behavior led to the adoption of the 12th. Okay? After they left office, though, they became these old men, and they found that they start to write letters back and forth to each other. Okay? And they find out, you know, our beliefs aren't that far apart. We have a lot in common. So they start writing these letters. Newspapers pick up on that. And newspapers start publishing these letters about the virtues of this country and where we need to improve, where we are already in good shape, all those things. Books are later published. You can buy those books today, the Adams-Jefferson letters, and you can read what they were talking about. But as the 50th anniversary approaches, Jefferson and Adams are still living, both of them. Okay? Celebrations everywhere around the United States. They felt so vindicated by all of this that people had truly remembered our history and the traditions that what brought us to this 50-year point. But both of them were too ill and too old to attend any of the celebrations. Okay? They just were not physically able to go. Okay? Jefferson couldn't go to anywhere in Virginia. In Charlottesville, Virginia, where Monticello is, people decided he can't come to our parties, we'll go to him. So Monticello is about 5 miles from Charlottesville. They took it up the mountain, and they took all the parades and the picnics and all that stuff, and it was on the grounds of Monticello. And Jefferson was pulled over by the window in his bed. He could watch this. But that afternoon, about 12:50 in the afternoon, Thomas Jefferson died. Okay? 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Okay? His last words were, "Is it the 4th?" They kept assuring him, "Yes, it is the 4th. You made it to the 4th." Okay? And there is a lot of things that family people wrote and things like that that said, even the day before, he kept saying, "Okay, are we getting close? Are we getting close?" Because he was hanging on for that. Legend has it that in the previous days, he spoke of John Adams very fondly, that they were friends and all these kind of things. And then we think about, okay, today we would just hop in a plane and we'd go across the country. You know, Charlottesville, Virginia and Boston, Massachusetts, that's a long way apart. And if you're thinking about you're going to be on a stagecoach or you're going to be on a horseback, that's a long ways to go. Well, when you're an old man like these guys were, you can't do that. You can't do those kind of trips. So that is kind of the story of Thomas Jefferson. Okay? In Boston, the same thing was going on. It was all these celebrations. Adams couldn't go to any of those either. He was older than Jefferson. His family placed his bed near the window so he could watch the parades go by. Adams lived in Quincy, Massachusetts, and Quincy is a suburb of Boston on the south side of Boston. Okay? And so all the parades and everything were down there around Adams's place. Late in the afternoon, John Adams died about 5:30 on July the 4th. So both of the people who were instrumental in writing that document died on the same day, the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. Okay? His last words were, Thomas Jefferson survives. Well, he didn't. Thomas Jefferson had died earlier in the day, but it took days and days to get the news because we didn't have these things that we could just text somebody around the world and just let them know what was going on. So that cool coincidence in history. Jefferson had passed earlier in the same day. Family Recollections told the stories years later that early on the last day of his life, John Adams said, "Oh yes, it is the 4th of July. God bless it, and God bless you all," were some of his last thoughts. Okay? Thomas Jefferson was 83 years old, and John Adams was 90. Okay? Up until Herbert Hoover, John Adams was the former president who had lived the longest. And Herbert Hoover eclipsed that by about 6 months. The next person that held that record then was a guy named Ronald Reagan, who was up in his mid-90s. And then Gerald Ford eclipsed that record. He was like 96. And then we know recently Jimmy Carter eclipsed them all because Jimmy Carter was 100. So that's the presidential record now. But 83 and 90 in 1826, that is very elderly. I mean, that's pretty old. So this is the place where John Adams is buried. It's a church in Quincy, Massachusetts. They were Unitarians. So a Unitarian church believes there's no Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They're all one. So that's a Unitarian church. So this is the church where they're interred. And John Quincy Adams is also buried here. So when you go there, you can see 2 presidents at once. So these are the crypts down in the lower level of that church. It says John Adams, signer of the Declaration of Independence, framer of the Constitution of Massachusetts, 2nd president of the United States, 1735 to 1826. So that was done by the Daughters of the American Revolution chapter. And then this is another shot I found on this one online. I took the other ones, but this one was online. So at Monticello, there is a large graveyard near Jefferson's home. Thomas Jefferson had a lot of foresight. He designed his own tombstone. And he said, these are the things I want to be remembered for. Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of American Independence, of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom, and father of the University of Virginia. Doesn't say anything about being president of the United States on there. Nowadays, people who are president, man, they want everybody to know that. And that's the last 20 presidents has been like that. But Thomas Jefferson, that's what he wanted to be remembered for. So there's another picture I took at Monticello. They were on opposite political sides. Adams was a Federalist, and Thomas Jefferson was a Democrat-Republican. And so when they got thrown together, then those differences really blew up. But Adams was a staunch Federalist. So, and which is huge amounts of government control on everything, and the Democrat-Republicans were less government control. So here's another one. Just if you can prove that you are related to Thomas Jefferson, you can be buried in that cemetery too. So it's a pretty large area, but it is open to any descendants of Thomas Jefferson. So that's in. There's another shot of that tombstone. Okay. Now we're going to bump another 50 years, and we go to 1876. Well, now you think about what happened in those 50 years. From 1826 to 76, we had the Mexican War, and then we had a small little thing called the American Civil War had happened during this time. And how are we going to pull things back together? 1876, you're only 11 years after the war's over. That is, that's just a fraction of time. The centennial marking 100 years since the signing had massive patriotic and often multi-day festivities across the country. The 1876 celebration was a major effort to unite the country. Ulysses S. Grant was the president. He says this is a day of reflection and gratitude for everything that we have in this country. The Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia was a focal point for a World's Fair. Attracted millions of visitors to see displays of American and international industrial and technological progress. It was the first time we thought about having these world fairs. and that was in 1876. Cities held massive, elaborate parades featuring military units, sometimes with Union and Confederate veterans, marching together, fire departments and civic organizations. Now, that's what I found online. But when I started looking at other sources, that's not exactly true. Marching together, not very much. Because at that point, we weren't even burying Confederate and Union veterans in the same cemeteries. There was very few places that they had mixed parades. I did find a couple of them. New York was one of them. Chicago was one of them. But think about, do you think they had mixed parades in Atlanta and New Orleans and some of those? Not a chance. And so that was some of the things. It's like, okay, I don't think that's quite an exact, accurate source. So anyway, I think that there was a lot of animosity. And if you think back when we did the Reconstruction night here, in Reconstruction wasn't even over yet. By July 4th, 1876, it wasn't over until early in 77. So there was still federal Union troops in all those southern states. So there was a lot of animosity going on. They were still trying to figure out what to do with these freed slaves. I mean, it's a pretty rough time in our history. So public readings of the Declaration of Independence were central to events in town squares. Speeches connecting the nation's founding to the challenges of 1876, Reconstruction, industrialization. The country was completely gearing up after the Civil War. Fireworks, large-scale fireworks, bonfires, cannon salutes, picnics with traditional foods, chicken, pie, lemonade, community games. There was events all across the country to celebrate this 1876. Grant's administration, Independence Day, was finally recognized as an official holiday. And you think, it took that long for it to be an official holiday? It did. It was still a controversial thing. Do we celebrate this or not? Originally applied only to federal employees. So if you were just working for somebody, you had to work that day. It wasn't a holiday. And in 1838, it became a paid holiday for federal employees only. Independent employers, they could make a choice whether they're going to pay anybody or not for that day. But you think you're talking 100, 150 years before any of these things are really recognized. Massachusetts is the first state to make it an official state holiday. Colorado becomes a state in 1876. So any of you that have that been with me at the museum and we're in that second building and there's that big flag in that case, I always say, okay, here's a 38-star flag. What does that mean to us? And people go, we don't know. That's what it is. That flag that's there is it has 38 stars on it. Colorado is the 38th state that comes in August 1st. Because of that, we're the centennial state, because it was the centennial of the Declaration of Independence. And so there's President Grant. And this is the proclamation. I showed that a couple times ago in this. But that is the proclamation that declared Colorado a new state. And then this is the second page of it, and Grant's signature is right there where Colorado becomes the 38th state. Okay. So now we bump another 50 years. And you think about 1876 to 1926, think about how the country's business had changed. We went from these smaller businesses to the era of big business. We went through a time that, the political parties controlled everything. Then we get to 1926. You're in the roaring 20s. Everything's pretty good right now. The World War I was in our rearview mirror. We had a lot to celebrate in 1926. Okay? The United States sesquicentennial, 150th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration. Emerging from the post-World War I era, the Spanish flu, great national expositions, local parades, and patriotic ceremonies. And this was something that I had not really ever dug into much when I found this. 300 acres World's Fair in Philadelphia is the focal point. 80-foot replica of the Liberty Bell, 26,000 light bulbs on it, a Treasure Island amusement area, and historical pageants. So we were starting to gear up on this 4th of July celebration. But the celebration begins with the ringing of bells nationwide at 11 o'clock, known as the Echo of the Liberty Bell, while millions of school children recited the Patriots' Pledge of Faith. Now, in all the years I taught, and all the books I've read and the places I've been, I had never heard of the Patriots' Pledge of Faith. So that was something that was brand new. I thought, I had never heard of that. So what they did, July the 4th, is there's not school going. All the school kids across the country were required to go to school that day, all across the nation, even though this is a summer day. And this is the pledge they repeated. I and do hereby pledge and declare my sincere belief, devout faith in the fundamental ideals of my country, so bravely proclaimed to the world by the immortal signers of the Declaration of American Independence. And in their words and noble spirit, we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor to support those ideals. And as a token of my sincerity and as an evidence of my gratitude for the blessings which that immortal document assured to all Americans, I do hereby make this contribution for the preservation of Monticello, the home of Thomas Jefferson, as a national memorial to the author of the Declaration of Independence and as a patriotic shrine for the children of America. Every kid was supposed to bring a nickel to school and donate it to the preservation of Monticello. Now, I did this same presentation on Monday, and one of the questions people said, well, didn't the government support these? No. Monticello is supported by a private foundation to this day. The government does not have anything to do with the support of Monticello. That's why it costs you $40 to go into Monticello right now. Okay, it's expensive to go there, but they preserve it themselves. Mount Vernon is the same thing. It's the Mount Vernon Ladies Association. It is not supported by the government, and so that's why it costs more. So this is an evidence that they were saying, we're going to support these things because they're worthy to be supported. And by the way, during the Civil War, both sides pledged, we will not bomb Mount Vernon or Monticello. And so the cities around them were all bombed to pieces, but those places were not, and they were preserved. So in all the years, I had never heard of this pledge of patriots. I'd never heard that one. But across the country, celebrations began at 11, simultaneous ringing of bells, recitation of the Patriots' Pledge. Calvin Coolidge, who was the president at that time, on the day afterwards, July 5th, delivers a major address at Philadelphia's Independence Hall. Now think about it, there's no TV, so it's on the radio, emphasizing the eternal nature of the nation's founding principles. Okay, I read the speech because now with AI you can find everything on there. And I read the speech and I thought it's pretty good, broadcast on the radio, but it lasted about 2.5 hours. And if you know from history, if you know what Calvin Coolidge's voice sounds like, he had a very monotone droll of a voice. They said on the thing, most of them said, most people tuned out after about 20 minutes. So they missed, because who's going to sit and listen to the radio for 2.5 hours? On a hot day in your house, days nobody probably had air conditioning or anything else. So he talked for about 2.5 hours. So there's Calvin Coolidge. He had become president after Warren Harding died, and then he was reelected one time. But Coolidge argued that the core principles of the Declaration, human equality, inalienable rights, and government by consent, are profound, final, and cannot be improved upon. We got to preserve those. Okay? He countered ideas that the foundational principles were outdated, arguing that those seeking to abandon them were not moving forward, but were actually reactionary and backward-looking. He emphasized that government serves to protect rights, not to create them, reinforcing the idea that people should bear their own responsibilities. Okay. 1976, okay. Bicentennial of the Declaration of Independence. Think about what happened from 1926 to 76. Okay, we've got the Great Depression, we've got the Dust Bowl, we've got World War II, we've got the Korean War. We're still had just kind of gotten out of the Vietnam War. Think about what had happened in that 50 years. And here we are, the bicentennial. Okay. This is the seal for the Colorado centennial, because with Colorado and the federal government, it's all the same. One's 100 and one was the 200th. So that was the Colorado Centennial logo. There's the American Revolution, the bicentennial logo. And any of you that were around at that time, there was stuff everywhere to buy. There was stamps, and there was the coins, and there was all this kind of stuff. Trinkets around everywhere. At the museum, we sold all kinds of those trinkets. We had the little keychains, we had coffee mugs, we had those little pins I just showed you, all kinds of stuff that we sold at the museum. We had license plates. Now there's sesquicentennial license plates today, but those are optional. In this day, everybody got new license plates every year. So everybody had these license plates. I still have mine. So, but celebrated massive nationwide festivities marking 200 years since the adoption of the Declaration. Deeply patriotic, year-long celebration designed to unite the country, reeling from Vietnam and Watergate, because both of those had just recently happened. Elaborate televised fireworks displays occurred in major cities, particularly over the Statue of Liberty in New York. One of the newscasts was saying, oh, it was also the sesquicentennial of the Statue of Liberty. No, it wasn't. Statue of Liberty wasn't done until 1886, not 1876. So I did email them in. They answered me back and they said, yeah, you're right. And they fixed it on their newscast because they were wrong. You know. So President Ford visited Valley Forge, Independence Hall, and New York City all on the same day to show how this American technology had really advanced. You can go clear across the country. You go to all these places all on the same day. So here's a picture of President Ford dancing with Queen Elizabeth in the East Room of the White House. And there's Ford's official portrait. Now, in 1976 also, I said, I already told you I was 20 years old that year. But that was also really a monumental year for me, too. Presidential election year. But that was the year I got to meet the President of the United States. And so it was that picture. So, yes, that is me. What will you look like in 50 years, And so that was in August of 76. And I put that in here because that was it was the coolest day of my life. It was just an amazing day. And I was running my restaurant at the time, and I had a scraggly looking red colored beard like my sideburns are. And my mother hated that beard. And I said, if I get to meet the President of the United States, I will shave it off. So they come home from work that day, and I had it shaved off. It's like, is that what that means? It is. So that was up at Vail. Because the way this all started was in 75, when shortly after he became president in 74. He was in his 60s, and he was swimming 5 to 10 miles a day, swimming that much. So he was still very athletic. And so they put a thing in the Denver newspapers that said, this is going to be paid for with private money. So I thought, well, I might get a cool letter. Because I was a geek then, too. And I thought I might get a cool letter. So I sent in $10. Okay. Well, then here about a month later, there was this article in the paper, and I hadn't told anybody I'd sent in $10 to Ford. And so there was an article in the paper that said, Coloradoan sends $10. The rest of the country couldn't, there was 260 other people. Most of those people had contributed $10,000. But I was in the same column with all these big name people for this $10. Well, my mom and dad were kind of like, you gave that, and then everybody was coming in the bank giving them a bad time. My friends were calling me saying, well, that's a dumb thing to do. Well, maybe I'll get a cool letter. I did get a cool letter, and it's on White House stationery, and it says me and the 460 other people that contributed made such a difference and all these kind of things. By the way, I did get to go to the White House one time and see the pool, so that was cool. But so then I'd been getting ribbed by all these people, and all these people who were here that were in my graduating class, they were all part of that too. They were giving me a bad time about all this stuff. And so Ford called me and said, I want to call and thank you for that, even for $10, because you cared enough to send that. And it said he didn't call all the people who sent 10,000. He called me. And he says, we're going to be in Vail at Christmas time. We'd love to meet you. I'm thinking, the President of the United States wants to meet me? So we had it all set up. I went through all the security clearance and all this kind of stuff. going to Vail. It was December 19th. Okay, can you imagine what the weather in the mountains used to be in December? And I got as far as Copper Mountain. Highway was closed because I-70 wasn't over that pass yet, so I couldn't get any farther. So I had to go in there and call up there. I had a number to call the Secret Service, and they said, well, here, let me get you with the Chief of Staff. Well, the man who was the Chief of Staff was a guy named Richard Cheney, who later became Vice President of the United States. But I got to know Dick Cheney on that phone call that night. And he says, don't worry, we'll be back next summer. We won't forget you. The next summer they called me. We don't think a snowstorm's going to stop us now. And so I got to go to Vail. And I got to go up and see him. And I remember going to the Secret Service gate, and they said, yeah, what do you need? Or something. I said, well, I think I have an appointment with the president. They go, yeah, right, you know. And he said, give me your ID. So I gave him my driver's license. They said, you do have an appointment with him. So they said, well, wait just a minute. Somebody will come and get you. And looked up, and it was Robert Dole and Elizabeth Dole. Dole was the one who Ford had picked to be his vice president. They came down to the gate and got me and escorted me up to meet the president. So, and I can still hear the words when I was standing up there waiting. They said, just a minute, the president will be out to see you shortly. I'm like, and everybody said, oh, you'll go up there, there'll be 50 people there. There wasn't, it was just me. So, and I got to meet the family and actually started a pretty decent friendship, and I went to Vail about 8 times after that. After he was former president, they'd call me and say, we're going to be up at Beaver Creek this weekend. You want to come up for a barbecue? Yes. So I'd go up there and go up and hang out with them, and it was, no one ever did go. I wasn't a golfer, so I didn't get to do that. Because they said once, would you want a caddy for him? Well, yeah, but I don't know anything about golf. So, but, well, I was invited to his funeral services at the National Cathedral, and the day that was, I was going to fly out to go, we had a massive blizzard here. It was like 45 inches of snow, and that was in 2006. And so I didn't get to go. But I did get the tickets, and I do have the invitation. They sent me all that stuff anyway. So that's my memory in 1976. So when I had seen him at that time, I said, we'd like to have something for our time capsule at the museum. Because, yes, I was involved at the museum then, too. And so this was the proclamation that he gave me for the museum's time capsule. And so it just says we mark the beginning of our 3rd century as an independent nation. And, it says we lay the cornerstone of America's 3rd century, commend your very special part in this great national celebration. And this went to the museum. Okay. And so the same day when I was there, I asked Mrs. Ford, I said, well, do you do one? And so his is a lot longer, and it's kind of what you would expect. Hers was a little different. I want to read the whole thing of hers. It says, greeting to the Strasbourg Centennial Bicentennial Committee. 1976 can be an old-fashioned celebration of the heart. If each American pauses to reflect on the meaning of freedom, more than parades, I hope there are many, and more than pilgrimages to the scenes of the past, this 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence should be celebrated by savoring our freedoms. We enjoy so many freedoms. We may worship as we choose. We decide where we live and where we work. We are free to express ourselves politically and artistically. But best of all, we have the freedom to dream and to follow those dreams. With best wishes for a meaningful personal celebration and high hopes for the next 200 years. And that one was signed Betty Ford. So it's that one right there. So I thought hers was a lot more personal sounding than the one that came from the president. But both of these were put in our time capsule at the museum. And then the time capsule was placed in the driveway at the high school. Well, then they did some remodeling there. So we have the time capsule. It's actually in my office at the museum. So that's where those letters are right now. So it's there. We still have it, but it needs to be reburied somewhere. But the thing it's in is all rusted and needs to have some work on it. But anyway, so commemorative coinage. I told about the thing. So the Eisenhower dollar, the back had the Liberty Bell and the moon on it, but just had the dual date. And then the Kennedy half dollar, the dual date on the front, and then Independence Hall on the back of that one. And then the Washington quarter, the dual date, and then the Patriot, the drummer boy on the back of that one. So, but small towns across America held parades, barbecues, and picnics. We did the same thing here. Towns painted the fire hydrants red, white, and blue. Children participated in Spirit of 76 events. Yes, as the Bicentennial Committee, I was on that committee. We wanted to paint all the fire hydrants red, white, and blue. Fire department said, no way. We can't do that. Other places in the country, they painted them that. And then after it was over, they had to go repaint them all because you can't have all these various colors because they can't see where they're at. But like I said, we wanted to do that here, but they said no. So our Bicentennial Commission, we had lots of celebrations in Strasburg. Our main building at the museum had been dedicated 2 years before, but the Wolf Creek School, where we have our Pioneer School going on this week, it starts, that was brought in during that time. We renamed streets. The street in front of the school used to be called Missouri Avenue. It was renamed Colorado Avenue. Okay? We labeled all the pre-1920 buildings in Strasburg. We had plaques for each one of them, and all the things up and down Main Street and on Arapahoe Street and then on Adams Street, we labeled all those buildings. They were red, white, and blue plaques about this big. And so it was kind of some of the things we talked about when we did the walk through Old Strasburg, but that was done in the thing. Wolf Creek School was moved to the museum grounds with a Colorado Centennial Grant. So there was a lot going on here and a lot going on across the country. So by 1976, things had really amped up as far as the way we celebrate these things. But now we arrive at 2026, 250th anniversary. Lots of artwork and logos, and you see lots of different pictures and stuff. And I like that one. And the logo, America 250. But when we think about that, it's like, wait 50 more years and it'll be our tricentennial, okay? And Colorado's 150th, our 250th, US 250th, that's the logo that's for the Colorado. And Colorado's sesquicentennial, wait 50 years, it will be Colorado's bicentennial. And the United States celebrates the 250th since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Massive nationwide celebrations over the holiday weekend, particularly on Saturday, July the 4th. We saw that if you watched anything on TV last weekend. Events spanning July 3rd through 5th. One of the proclamations that President Trump made was that these celebrations, there's a lot of them that are going to go on through the rest of the year because it's not just now. There's going to be lots of different commemorations throughout the year. The coinage, there's the mint sets over there, but there is the $50. One thing I like about the $50 is what it says on the back. Knowledge is the only guardian of true liberty. We have to teach this next generation what this is all about. And that's the thing that just drives me crazy. We have to pass that on because so many people in that next generation don't know that stuff. And they need to know those things to perpetuate this. These are the quarters. So the first one was the Mayflower Compact quarter. The second one is George Washington and the Patriot with Revolutionary War. The third one is Thomas Jefferson and the Liberty Bell. Those are the three that are out so far. The fourth one will come out in August, and it is the Constitution, We the People, and it's got James Madison on the front. The fifth one will come out in late September or early October, and it's Abraham Lincoln with the Gettysburg Address on that one. So those are going to be cool quarters that will come out just this 1 year. The dime, you know, some of the stuff that comes up on the news sometimes, it's like, oh, come on. We don't have to keep, you know, to see how much we can, misstatements we can make. They said, oh, it's because of the current administration that it's only the arrows on that eagle. Baloney. This is an eagle from the 1820s. That was on coins, it was on paper money and things like that. We didn't have the olive branch on our logos then. That wasn't put on until after World War II. So this is a replica of an 1820s logo. On the front is an early depiction of Lady Liberty on the dime. Now you start seeing a few of the dimes in change, because I think people might not see them, but I think these coins are going to be very difficult to find because people are going to grab onto them as soon as they see them. But the nickel didn't change a lot. It's got the dual date. And then the penny has the dual date on it. This will be the last year of the Lincoln penny. The last year was the last ones that were done for circulation. These are only in the sets. So there's Lincoln pennies in that set back there. They'll be in the silver proof set and the regular proof set. So if you want a penny, that's the only way you're going to get it. No, the mint set are, well, there's one's Philadelphia and one's Denver. The proof sets all come from San Francisco, so they all have S's on them. But this will be the last time, because the Lincoln penny will not even be in sets after this year. This is it. So on all the other coins, yes, they do. Yeah, because if you look on those back there, they've got the Denver ones all have a D on them, and the other ones have a P. And then the proof sets have S's. So, yep. So, one thing that I wanted to show you all just real quickly is the Freedom Plane stuff. I talked about it the last time we were here, which would be 2 months ago. But the Freedom Plane was in Colorado. It was on display at the Colorado History Museum. And so I just found a few pictures online of the plane when it arrived. There was a similar one that happened in '76. They had some of these documents too. But so it was a very small room. Jeff Rasp, who was the principal at the school, him and I went together. We got there, it was like 10 o'clock in the morning. We were probably in line with 300 other people. It moved very slow. The room that these documents were in was smaller than this room. We said that, well, we've done crowds before, and that was a very poor way to have that organized. But State Historical Museum doesn't care what we think. So, but you go in, and then you walked around, and there was all these documents around there. You can see how slow it was. They were letting people take pictures and stuff. Well, I took pictures too, but you really had time to look at them. Some people were spending way too much time, and there was somebody along there saying, you know, you need to speed it up a little bit because you can't read the documents. But so this is just some of the shots that I took while we were standing in line. And then the first one was the Articles of Association, which is a precursor to the Declaration of Independence. It was very smudge. You couldn't really read the signatures very good, but this was done in October of 1774. So the war was already going, but this is still almost 2 years before the Declaration of Independence. So these were oaths of allegiance of George Washington, Aaron Burr, and Alexander Hamilton. The lady that was there, she was from the National Archives. She said that they had about 1,200 of these oaths of allegiance in their collection there. She said many of them are digitized, so you can go online and see them. But I asked her, I said, why did you pick these three? She said, well, I said, obviously George Washington, and then you got Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. Well, Aaron Burr killed Alexander Hamilton later on, and I said, is that why? And she goes, yeah, because that's the one people want to see. So, okay. So anyway, those were the oaths of allegiance that they had there. That's kind of a shot back of those two. The next case had that copper plate engraving of the Declaration of Independence. And that's where we know what that looked like. We know what those signatures looked like because they made like 50 of them at that time. And there's only like 6 or 7 of them that exist today, but that was one of them. And then this was the Treaty of Paris that ended the war. That was signed by John Jay and Ben Franklin, and but those are the wax seals. It was done in Paris at Versailles. So I took several pictures of that. This is the last case, and it was the draft of the first page of the Constitution. And it was kind of hard to read. The preamble was only about half what the preamble actually turned out to be, but it was early 1787 before it was final adoption. This is the tally sheet that was used to ratify the Constitution. So it told who voted yes and who voted no. That was in there. And then this was an early draft of the Bill of Rights with a lot of markings on it and things like that. So that was the documents that were there. Once we got in there, it took us about maybe 20 minutes to get through there, but it was worth going. And I'm glad we went. But one of the things that I was looking at in there when we were standing in line, and yes, I look at kind of some of them might think it's kind of weird, but I was looking at the people who were in line and saying, how many of these people were alive in 76? And you start looking, and there's not very many of them. Because a lot of them are, even the kids, there was a lot of children, and then there was a lot of adults that I know were not 50 years old. And you think about this, well, this is cool that they are bringing their kids to things like this. And I thought, what is it going to be the next 50 years? Because there's not very many of us in this room that might even be here in 50 years, And so, you know, there's a few of you that might be in your 80s. Joe, how old are you? I can't remember. Okay, so yeah, but so you guys back here, you know, you're about 17, 18 now. So see, you'd be about my age, you know, in the tricentennial. So I think about how are people going to remember these things 50 years from now? It's just kind of a thing. When we look at how other generations remembered it for years, I thought that was kind of interesting. So the way I want to conclude this is, I have this book that I bought at a garage sale in 1977. And it's a U.S. history book, but it's dated 1876. So it's 150 years old. And there's an epilogue in the back. And the epilogue is like talking to the people in 1876, but I felt like that is the same thing as talking to people in 2026. Because the things it says that we need to do to perpetuate this democracy are things we all should be paying attention to today. And I thought it was pretty interesting that 150 years ago they recognized this. And there's 4 traits. Published 1876. The last entry in this book says there's a new state called Colorado had been admitted. That's why I bought the book, because I thought that was cool that this was the year Colorado became a state. But still relevant to this nation and all of us still today. And so I think about what should we remember out of this 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. The first idea that they say we need to concentrate on is the idea of national unity. Washington spoke of that in his farewell address. He said we should beware of factions. So keep thinking, what's going on in our country today? All efforts should be made to rise above the strife of party and the turmoils of war. The idea that the United States is one nation and not 38. This book is written, but there's only 38 states. But we have one nation, not 50 states today. Such a patriotism is the cable and sheet anchor of our hope for the future. You got to pull it together. Okay? We should remember our common sacrifices over all these years. And so the idea of national unity is such a cornerstone that we are struggling with today in this country, terribly. Okay? Second one is the universal secular education of the people. You got to educate the next generations to carry this on, or they're not going to know what's important and what this all means. The subjects should have the knowledge and discipline necessary to govern themselves. You got to teach it and you got to pass it on. Between two stupendous evils, the rational tyranny of the intelligent few is preferable to the furious and irrational tyranny of the ignorant many. You got to teach everybody. A republic without intelligence makes the perpetuation of our democracy an impossibility. This is 150 years ago they're saying this. Active, thinking, resolute, conscious, personal consent distinguishes the true free man from the puppet. I used to tell my students, pay attention what's going on. Make your own decisions. Don't let somebody else make your decisions. Don't let something on that TV make your decision or something on that phone. Make your own decisions. You have a brain, make your own. The public free school is the fountain whose streams shall make glad all the lands of liberty. We must educate or perish. Number 3, toleration is the broadest and most glorious sense. During colonial times, intolerance embittered the lives of our fathers. Men desire free thought, but fear stands at the door. Tolerance is free speech. Respect what someone else thinks. Nature is diversified, so are human faculties, beliefs, and practices. We might not like what somebody else thinks, but they have a right to think that. Essential freedom is the right to differ, and that right must be sacredly respected. The right of free thought, free inquiry, and free speech is as clear as the noonday and bounteous as the air and ocean. That's words right out of this book. Without a full, clear, accepting, cheerful recognition of this right, America is only a name, her glory a dream, her institutions a mockery. fourth, final one, is the nobility of labor. Nobility of labor is essential to the stability of the republic. Must be the mission of the United States to ennoble the toil and honor the toiler. In some societies, the laborer hold a perpetual disgrace. Let that odious distinction perish. It is the genius of American institutions in the fullness of time to wipe the last stain from the brow of toil and to crown the toiler with the dignity, luster, and honor that they deserve. Okay. I thought those four things were something, it's like, what year was this written? That could have been written in 2026. But the conclusion is this is the last segment of this book. The scroll of the century is rolled together. The work is done. Peace to the memory of the fathers. Green be the graves where sleep the warriors, patriots, and sages. Calm be the resting place of all the brave and true. Gentle be the summer rains on famous fields where armies met in battle. Forgotten be the animosities and heartburnings of the strife. Sacred be the trusts committed to our care, and bright the visions of the coming ages. That's it. Thank you. And these, drawing box. So we're going to do the door prizes now. So we'll call your name, and then you come up, and you get to just pick what you want, and we'll just go from that. So I'll get Mary. I'll get my sister. Come here, Mary. Okay. Go ahead and start. Mary, I'll just grab one. Okay, you can hold it. Okay, Reedy. Number 1. Okay. Dawn Gerstenberger. Alyssa. Okay. Oops. Okay. Marilyn Peacher. Okay. Dave Adams. That's the Constitution of the United States, a hardcover copy. So, okay. Donna Holcomb. Yep. Yep, you bet. Dana Weaver. Yeah, it is. So, okay. Mike Ayers. Yep. Okay. And Maurice Mertens. Okay. See how many we got? Because we got some left. So. Okay. All right. Debbie McCammond. Stacy Knutson. What? I'm not going to right now. I thought. Yeah, those are postcards in the pictures there. So, yeah. So, Millie Mertens. Diane Barnett. Tracy Morgan. Okay. Barb Adams. Raymond Morris. Okay. 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 So we got Raymond's coming. Holly Kay. So there's 1, 2. We got 3 things left. One more. Dana Behrens. So there's. So I think that's it. So there's some glasses and there's candy dish and some fancy glasses. So does anybody have any questions about anything that we did? No. They said that they were not going to redo them, and once they sold out, that was it, because they've done real limited amounts on them. So, and they are available on the secondary market, and boy, they're the pennies are running around about $50 on eBay for 1 penny. And the whole mint sets are about $350 on eBay now. So oh, right.
I'm a star.
So, any other questions? Yes.
It kind of doesn't, but you talked about Missouri Avenue up here. A month ago, you told us why Adams and Arapahoe streets are named the way they are. Why was Missouri named Missouri?
They just, I don't know how they picked that, unless it was somebody that was, when they were laying out these streets, because you've got Iowa.
Do you know?
And,
Oh, Diane knows.
That's where my grandparents were from.
oh, so did they lay out the streets in the town? Oh, okay. But because there's Iowa Avenue, and there's just some of the states. I don't know.
They picked the name out of the box.
They might have, and maybe the county said, here, just pick these. Here's these names. But I know Adams and Arapahoe streets were for the new counties, because when the streets were laid out about 1910 or so, Adams and Arapahoe had just become new counties, and so that's where those two streets. I know those names came from there. But
How about Monroe Street?
huh?
How about Monroe Street?
I don't know. 'Cause see, somebody said, "Oh, it was president's
Yeah,
names
that's what
then,"
I-
because you had Monroe and Adams,
Yeah.
but I said that Adams was for Adams County and Arapahoe County. But
Adams County was not named for John Adams, so.
no, no. So, but anyway, thank you so much for coming tonight. There's back there on the table, there are again the flyers for our next series. Next month we will be at the Legion Hall on the Thursday before Hometown Days, and it'll be Strasburg history. And I'll probably touch base on some of these streets and some of this stuff too. But we have food there that night too, because F&C Realty is still sponsoring the food, and so they will be there. And that's it. It will be at the Legion Hall, and then in September we'll be back here and start World War I. So, okay, I'll be here for a little bit. If anybody got any questions, want to come up and ask privately. But thank you again for coming. I appreciate you all. Thank you. Thank you.